Good evening. I'd like to call to order at least the school committee portion of tonight's meeting. We're having a combined special school committee and select board meeting, so I'm calling to order my portion.
Yeah, we're having a joint meeting. It's calling together the meeting of the select board with the, what is today, the April 1st, 6:30 p.m. is the time, and I'd like to call this meeting into order.
Okay. And so the purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss with our consultant, JCJ is here with us. It's joint deliberation, the MSBA process for the consideration of a statement of interest. Both boards have received and sat for a nice review of the feasibility of the facilities and a study update. So we're going to consider that. But before we get to that, if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so at this time, just a brief review, we'll give, Doug is here with us, and then we also have Lena, and we'll give you guys the floor in just a minute. We'll have some consideration there, some conversation. We have Mr. Cutlass here with us remotely as well, and so all of our votes will have to be roll call, and then we'll have also any votes will be separate boards as well, and then we can also consider a vote, and we have time for public comment if that's a consideration for anybody that's with us. So the floor is yours, sir.
All right, thank you. Good evening. I'm glad to be back in Tewksbury. So this evening, we are going to focus on some items that we heard as concerns or questions from the two presentations that we made to the Select Board and the School Committee. So we will be focusing on what a Massachusetts School Building Authority Statement of Interest is and what it isn't. We'll also revisit the timeline so that we can identify when there may be financial commitments by the community to help move a project forward. We then have an overview of the 6 different options that were considered, and then we will close our intended portion of the presentation to summarize again the recommendation of moving forward with option 2. We have all of the information that we presented at both of the committee, the previous presentations as reference material. So if there's a need to go back to that information, we have it readily available to review with this committee, shared groups. So, and hopefully this is in your packet as well, so that you can read it. The statement of interest is an opportunity for a district to inform the Massachusetts School Building Authority about deficiencies in the local school facilities and how those issues affect the delivery of the educational program. As with any MSBA funded project, it is delivery of education that is the baseline for all of their decisions. It is the critical first step in applying the competitive grants for new construction, additions, or renovations. So again, there's no commitment to a new school project or an addition or renovation. It's saying that there's an interest in studying those options for future consideration for a building project. And again, this is to be considered under the MSBA Core Grant Program. It helps MSBA prioritize projects based on need and urgency. So as we've reported at the previous 2 meetings, MSBA on an annual basis receives applications for statement of interest. The deadline for this year's submission is April 17th. So based on how well the community defines the deficiencies in the educational needs of the facilities, that then allows MSBA to prioritize which projects they will invite into their program. I'm sorry, presentation's behind me. So yeah, to demonstrate, and again, this is your statement of interest is demonstrating to MSBA that the community supports the submission of the SOI. That's why we're meeting this evening and requiring, if there is an interest to move forward, a vote of the Select Board and the School Committee. So again, that demonstrates to MSBA that there is a willingness on the part of community to move forward. They receive a number of applications. There are a number of districts that have needs. They want to make sure that there is community support to explore a project. And again, submitting an MSBA, a statement of interest, MSBA, is not a guarantee that you will be invited in. It's an opportunity to be considered. Once the statement of interest is accepted, again, April 17th is the deadline for this year's submission. MSBA staff will do their due diligence. They will check the submission for completion. There are certain documents that you have to submit, and they want to make sure that that's the first test. You submitted everything that they expect. Second, they will, they will review the deficiencies in how well you describe the educational plans, because again, delivery of education is their top priority. And then if needed, there will be a senior staff site visit to the target facility. Then MSBA recently completed their 2025 school survey report. They have, let's see, I know that we've seen copies of 2010, 2016, now 2025. So they try to do that on a bi-yearly basis. So there's some very familiar with the schools in Tewksbury, but again, it might warrant coming back out and visiting the subject schools. At the completion of the due diligence, the staff then will make a recommendation to the board of directors on what statement of interest should be recommended to be invited into the eligibility period. Again, they'll be looking at the building age. They will look at space per student. You know, how are you utilizing your facilities? They'll be looking at the enrollment. Is this a situation where there's overcrowding, as you had in 2006? You currently don't have that, but 20 years later, it's a different scenario. Then they'll also be looking at the condition of your major systems, again, the condition of the building, and then finally, and again, most importantly, the district's educational mission. You know, how is that going to be achieved, or how is it being impacted by your current facilities? If the recommendation of the staff to the MSBA Board of Directors is to invite your statement of interest into feasibility, the MSBA Board of Directors will take a vote at their board meeting, typically in December, to invite those districts into feasibility, their eligibility period. What this isn't is a commitment. There is no final financial commitment with submitting a statement of interest. So I want everybody to understand that. It's demonstrating that there's a desire and a will from the district to engage with MSBA to explore the opportunity of a school project in your community. Any questions on what a statement of interest is or isn't? No? Okay. So again, I wanted to use the timeline that we reviewed at previous meetings of the best case scenario. This is submitting a statement of interest in 2026, next 2 weeks, having the MSBA staff complete their due diligence and make a recommendation to the Board of Directors at the December meeting to invite you into eligibility. If that's the case in December and you're successful, the district then has 270 days to complete 7 tasks for MSBA. And again, that is confirming that you're complying with their guidelines. You are organizing the school building committee. I have to read this because I can't read my notes. Documenting the maintenance practice, which again, you know, your protocols are very well established and you have great documentation, so that should be an easy lift for your district. Certifying design enrollment. That's something that MSBA will do their demographic studies. They will work with the district. They will talk to you about grade configurations that are aligned with the delivery of your education, aligned with your existing facilities. And the next part, and again, it's highlighted in green because we want to make sure that this is the first financial commitment, and that would be securing the funds for a feasibility study. This needs to be completed within the 270 days, so first commitment for funding would be around September, October of 2027 if you're invited in this December. And again, the feasibility studies range anywhere from $1 million to $2 million. And then it would be executing the feasibility study agreement with MSBA, all culminating around September, October of next year. At which time, that also needs to be voted on by the MSBA Board of Directors, usually at their December meeting, to invite you into feasibility. That is when you start organizing your team. And again, it takes about 3 to 4 months to hire your owner's project manager, left field in this case, for this effort. And then your designer, another 3 to 4 month window, case JCJ in this exercise. So organizing the project takes anywhere from 6 to 8 months, as quickly as you can make decisions. And that's when the clock starts ticking relative to developing the design. So again, we'd have to go through the different modules of feasibility, schematic design, concluding typically around the end of 2029, so that it could be presented to your community at the May 2030 town meeting. Again, that would be the next financial commitment, and that would be for the total project scope. So by 2030, your OPM design team will have worked with you to define the scope, the budget, the cost of the project, as well as the schedule. That then goes to your voters to say yes or no to move forward. A successful vote, again, based on our experience, track record for this size schools that we're studying, the earliest the occupancy would be the fall of 2033. Now, there was conversations at the previous meetings about submitting multiple statement of interests and whether or not MSB would accept multiple projects in. They have in the past, but again, the number of statement of interests they received, they tend to have you prioritize your school with the most need. I can speak from JCJ's experience. We are in the second cycle of that with the Manchester Essex Regional School District. 2015, they submitted a statement of interest for the Manchester Essex Memorial Elementary School. That was completed in 2023. Manchester Essex got back in line in 2023, and they're now moving forward with the study for the Essex Elementary School. We are planning, they are planning to have a vote of their community to move forward with that project in December of this year. If that's successful, they are targeting an occupancy of fall of 2030. So again, the 7 to 8 year cycle has been tested and proved. So in the case here in Tewksbury, it's likely that if you have to submit multiple statement of interest, you're looking at that period for each one of those projects to be realized. Any questions on that?
Doug, I have a question. So
Yes, sir.
Obviously module 1, feasibility funding.
Yep.
Module 2, once we get the feasibility funding, then we go into OPM and designer.
Correct.
We will need funding for that as well.
That's that allocation.
Okay, so
million.
that's, I just make sure that's within that $2 million,
Correct.
$2 million?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Yep.
Okay.
So that feasibility fee that you establish in eligibility will take you
We'll
up
cover
to the
that.
2030
Okay.
vote. Correct.
Can I ask a question or maybe clarify? So all of the different scenarios that you showed us during your presentation were not just for one specific school, but it sounded like you said we can only submit for one school.
So a district can submit as many statement of interest as they want.
Yeah.
Historically, MSBA will come back to the district and ask them to prioritize. It's unusual that they would actually put 2 projects into the pipeline at the same time.
So does that mean with all of the different, where you showed us where we have to do something to each one of the
Correct.
schools, we would only be able to do something to one school?
It's likely, it's highly probable that that would be the case if you're going to be receiving MSBA funding, grant funding through the core program.
Madam Chair, if I can clarify a little, this is also what we did with the Center Elementary School. If, and those of you that were around then will remember, it was actually called the Trahan Project. They accepted the statement of interest with the highest need, which was Trahan. And I won't revisit the whole history, actually went on the exact same timeline, 2015, opened in 23. But they accepted the statements of interest. 4 went in. They accepted the Trahan as the biggest need, but in our discussion in that time frame, that year, that was called the Trahan Elementary School, intended to bring on, fix the needs of both North Street and Trahan in one project and pull 2 out of the other 2. So they use the one statement of interest to do that project and take care of more than one need. That's when they study all of the assessments we have available to us. This ones before, to determine what's the size and scope of the ad reno or new build.
I guess, but every single scenario had us shifting, or a number of scenarios had us shifting grades, which meant we had to do upgrades to all of the other schools to accommodate the new grade. So I'm just trying to, will that all be encompassed into one?
The facility assessment will, however, as was discussed, those could be accelerated repair projects, not necessarily the same project. You can talk about that a little bit further, Doug, but
Sure.
those were code upgrades. If
Yeah.
any of those were to be touched, they had to be studied.
Yep.
If any of those schools were to be touched in any of those options, the study had to include what repairs would have to be done under code.
Okay.
So they're included, but that doesn't necessarily have to happen at the exact same time under option 2 if it was addressing the Heathbrook and doing at the same time.
Okay.
Again, that would be part of the due diligence for the MSBA, determining the enrollment, so that they often come back with multiple enrollments. It's likely that they might come back and say, if doing, for example, as a target school, replace it in kind, and study, what are the code updates, minimum requirements there, and then addition renovation to meet the educational program, because again, you have to define what your educational program will be. That is the cornerstone of any MSBA study. How are you going to deliver education? And then they might say, okay, one of the considerations might be if you consolidate Heathbrook and Dewing, certain capacity, enrollment capacity there, that needs to be studied as well. Can you build it on the Dewing site? Can you build it on a different site? Could it be on the Heathbrook site? So there are a number of scenarios the MSBA will work with the district to include in the enrollment certification letter that becomes the basis of the feasibility study.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Clarification on that issue, this issue, just trying to use an example. So one of the options, if it involves like an addition renovation on the center school and say the Wynn school, those are 2 separate projects
Correct.
because they're not accelerated projects, they're addition renovation projects.
Correct.
And then the other thing to keep in mind is that when you submit separate projects, the MSBA, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't typically, you wouldn't have a statement of interest for one project and then a year later they approve you for a new project. They usually like you to be at least in the audit stage for that project, so they want it to be sequential. So that's an important factor in the decision you have to make, because if they're 2 separate projects, it's not going to be one done and then one started a year later. It's going to be one done, another started probably 4, 5, 6 years later.
Yep.
And so it really elongates the whole process. It's something to keep in mind for disruption to the educational process, and also cost and unpredictability because of all those things.
So adding to that, Mr. Kern, is when we were evaluating the different options that had multiple statement of interests, and again, if each statement of interest has a life cycle of 6 to 8 years, you have 3 statement of interests, you're out 24 years, worst case scenario. You're now starting to look at the facilities that you have online that are about 25 years old. They're reaching their 50-year life cycle. So now you're going to have additional facilities that are competing for those funds. So trying to leverage the real estate that you have today to the betterment of your community, it's in great shape. But again, the longer that schedule extends out, the likelihood you're going to be bringing more variables into the equation for MSBA to consider. So there's that to factor in as well, which is one of the reasons we've recommended option 2 as the preferred option to move forward, because it allows you to address your educational needs with one statement of interest, predictable schedule, and then at the end of the 8 years, you can now start ramping up for those other facilities. And at the same time, you can currently working on some of the capital improvement projects, the code issues, if you will, that can get below the threshold that's going to require full upgrades based on the level of renovation. So it's a solution that allows you to manage the improvements of your facility over time.
Good, kind of follow-on question to that. So there's been a lot of mention of kind of this whole process we have to go through to 2033. and then we keep coming back to, recommended option 2, which I'm not opposed to. But we're kind of ahead of the game, right? The average project doesn't have this level of detail. Like, we stood up our study committee, we engaged you all, so we're kind of ahead of the curve. So do we need to make that determination now? Like, at this point in the game, since other projects wouldn't have had this level of diligence, are we required to make that commitment at this point?
For the statement of interest,
So the statement of interest makes sense, and I read through the
Right.
draft, so, okay, we've identified the school, we have the reasons for it, that makes sense. But like committing to option 2, or any of the options, are we required to do that for this part of the process?
so I would say that the evaluation of option 2 led to a target for the statement of interest, in that you are identifying the 2 schools with greatest need to prioritize that for them for MSBA. Because it's likely you could submit on doing, they come back and say, well, that's a newer school built in 1970. You really should be looking at Heathbrook. That's 1957, notwithstanding it had renovations in 75. So that's part of MSBA's due diligence to make sure that you have the target facility. But again, you're not truly committing to option 2. You're committing that you're going to explore improving your schools.
Yeah, no, which I don't think there's any question of the need, right? Like,
Yes.
that's, I was involved in the study committee when it first started, so I get it. I think everyone's
Okay.
aligned there. Just my only concern was committing to something, a path this far out, when we're talking 2033. If the only requirement is alignment on a statement of interest, I'm good with that. But if
Yep.
we're gonna say, we're locking into 2, and we haven't done all the additional feasibility steps between now and 2030, then I would have some more questions.
Yeah, this is saying we want to study this further.
Perfect.
Right, we've done our due diligence, we know we have need, we can define urgency, right? We can define our educational needs. That's going to put you in a favorable position with MSBA to recommend your statement of interest for moving forward.
Perfect. Thank
The
you.
real study will begin once you get into feasibility.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may? There are also, I forget how many, statutory priorities.
7.
This one would fall under statutory priority 7, which says that we have a building need based on obsolete building, mechanicals, and you can explain it better than I can, Doug, and that's how we put in for our other 4 elementary schools before, because there are other reasons you might need an ad reno or rebuild. And in statutory priority 7, it says where the outcome could be a renovation, an addition, a new build. So it doesn't lock you in under statutory 7 for a particular solution.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I just ask another follow-up question, sorry? So with your funding models that you showed us, and I'm just gonna use option 2 as an example, because that's what we've been talking about, that's 206 million. But I think what you're saying is, with the new school cost of 147.3, that would be a mix between MSBA funding and town support funding.
Correct.
And then any of the upgrades to Center Ryan Wynn or TMHS to fit the model would be town funded, because it's not part of
Correct.
that project. Okay,
Let-
all right, I got it now, thank you.
Let me forward to the slide that was the summary of the costs. To your point,
Yeah.
historically, the town has paid about 60% of the total project costs. So in the case of option 2, with the estimated $206 million cost, that's for all of the aggregate of the projects. That's the code upgrades and everything, all the schools. But with the MSBA process, you'll be focusing on potentially the new school option, which is $147 million approximately. So the district share would be about 60% of that.
Of the 147 million plus, we'd have to pay 100% of the Ryan Wynn TMHS quota.
Well, not necessarily 100%, because boiler replacement, window replacements, and roofs are eligible for the accelerated repair program.
Okay, okay.
So you can
we'll
submit
find
those as
other
well.
ways to fund that, but.
Right.
okay.
Correct. And
Okay.
again,
those are
MSBA
Every other year for us.
Okay,
every other year. Yeah. So the next cycle for accelerated repair projects is next year.
okay.
It's every odd year.
So Doug, just to clarify on this, realistically, sticking with the option 2 scenario, how many projects realistically is that?
Realistically, in terms of statement of interest, grant
Whether it's
funded,
whether it's through the MSBA process or the accelerated repair process or any other process, I suppose.
well, there's one building project,
Okay.
and then there could be multiple renovation alteration projects.
And can all those be submitted at the same time, all those renovation alteration projects?
Well, I was going to break that down further
Okay.
because they're not in terms of the core building program.
Yeah.
They're actually improving your facilities as capital improvement projects. So they can be planned over time. Some are eligible for the accelerator repair. I think it's in the town's interest to break them out in smaller packages so you can better manage them. And it puts you in a position where you don't cross the 50% threshold of the total building area. That then would kick that into a full building project.
Okay, thank you.
That's that level 3 renovation that kicks that in.
Appreciate it.
Would there be an issue if we did it, if we broke those up into smaller projects, would there be an issue for the students because we're upgrading per the code for the new grade that we'd be putting into those schools? So is there going to be an issue there?
A disruption?
Not a disruption, but like, are we going to upgrade a school for 6th, 7th grade when we still have 5th graders in there? And is there going to be an issue with that?
So when we were looking at the capital improvement projects, I'll try to differentiate that now. Trying to identify that as work that be completed during summer recess.
Okay.
So to minimize the impacts to the student and school operations,
Yeah.
recognizing that you still have summer programs.
Yeah.
So again, those would have to be managed.
I'm good. Any more questions? So I guess the question is, how much of the presentation do people think that we need to see back through? Any questions? Do we need any more review from that? No. Okay.
Just if that's sort of the end of your presentation, just a couple other thoughts from my perspective then. In terms of MSBA's due diligence that they'll do, assuming, does that consist of utilizing resources on our end in terms of our district employees, our town employees? What can we expect during that process?
It's an iterative process with MSBA, so as they have questions or clarifications, they would reach out.
Okay.
Superintendent Reagan, I think you can talk about the interaction with them on the amendment for center.
My experience is we're in that, even before that December
Okay.
timeframe, right? They'll reach out, they're definitely gonna walk and look at the schools generally. I mean, we have a lot of facility assessment data.
Yeah.
I can say that, from the work we've done in the past to this, to your point, I mean, we've done, Ms. Mackey, we got a lot of good data for them, but they're gonna wanna come out and look at those buildings. They're definitely gonna wanna meet with us. My experience over the center, and even back when we were with the middle school project, Ms. Cutlass, remember, well, we went in with certain ideas under those statutory priorities, and we came out with a different project. So that's part of their due diligence in talking with the district. I'm going to expect they'll invite us in, when I say us, the district, to talk through their thinking. Because that wasn't, it was, I would like to say it wasn't a done deal when we showed up on the center school project. They were behind us, what felt like 100% on one full K-4 building through that iterative process. And then when we showed up to talk about it, they said, this isn't a project we think you should take on, nor can we take on. So there was definitely some back and forth getting to the final line.
And then just my last question is more for you, Mr. Curran. Just in terms of funding for the feasibility study that we would embark on in 2027, I guess. How do you see the funding of that taking place, and where those funds may come from?
So that's a $1 to $2 million expense, so I would think that would be like a free cash expense, but you could also roll it into the bond later on. But I think initially, I would approach it that way, free cash for stabilization.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Cutlass, anything from you? Any questions?
I know I have two comments, but
Yeah.
I'll save them for later if you want.
No, you can feel free. This is the time.
Okay, well, number one, I question the price they have for a new school is $147 million. And that's in $20, $30. And I question that for two reasons. Wilmington is going out building a new elementary school this summer. They already got MSB approval. They worked for and their school will be approximately the same size as our new proposed elementary school. The cost this summer is $173 million, significantly more than the $147 million. Drake is doing the exact same thing. New elementary school, slightly larger than ours, like 40 students larger, approved by MSBA and voted $178 million. So that 147, I think, is significantly lower than the reality. The reality is that price would be, forget about the rest of the schools, that price alone would be $200 million.
So,
And as Doug said earlier, maybe it was at the school committee meeting, our reimbursement rate is 60%, but the reality is there are numbers of exclusions. For example, it was 60% for the high school, we only have 50%. It was 60% for the still at Center Elementary, we only have like 45. Reality is we're only going to get 40%. So to build a new elementary school for $200 million is going to cost the average Tewksbury homeowner $1,000 a year. And I think that is way too high. That's the average house, $1,000 a year for 20 years, if we go in that direction. I think the better direction to go is to have a targeted renovation of the building in the deeper, targeted to what's really needed. And price that out very specifically, look at that very hard, and look at all the detail around that. I think that's the way we should go. That's one person's opinion, but at $200 million, you're talking $1,000 a house, and that's just untenable for the town of Tewksbury, in my view. That's my comment, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug, how big is that $147 million school?
So interestingly, following the school committee meeting, I circled back with our estimator, PMMC. They were involved in both projects that were referenced at the meeting, the Drake project as well as Wilmington's Wildwood Elementary School. So we were able to confirm that Drake was K through 5, 860 students, 165,000 square feet at $182 million, estimated about $1,100 a square foot. Drake also has ledge and it has geothermal included in its number. Wilmington Wildwood is pre-K through 5, 755 students, 165,000 square feet, and that's the $173 million that was referenced, and that's about $1,000 a foot. The estimates that PMC was forecasting for this study, and please understand, these are not final designs. These are conceptual test fits. The design will evolve. It's based on historical square foot cost, so you're not comparing apples to apples in terms of the level of estimating and the accuracy of the estimate to the final product. The whole exercise for this study was a comparative analysis between the different options that had common elements. So it was a basis of comparison. We know the numbers will change. However, the estimates that were carried for the new schools were estimated about $1,430 a square foot and $1,470 a square foot. So again, talking with the estimator that was involved in those previous two projects, they felt comfortable where we are in the level of design and level of information that they had to put a number to, that it's a reasonable number for this type of discussion.
So what was the square footage of the new school, do you know?
120, 122?
122,000.
Okay, so it's 122 versus 165, and the cost per square foot, what'd you say, 1,400 versus 1,100?
Correct.
So I
Correct.
think that's safe to say that that's a very conservative number that you put forward.
It's a conservative number, but again, there's a lot of detail missing because it hasn't been explored
Right.
yet.
On that, can you just touch on, to Mr. Cutlass's point about what drives the percentage that the MSBA would cover?
So that gets into their assessment of eligible cost. And that's why we're always careful when we present initial numbers to communities, because MSBA has to go through and determine what is eligible and what is ineligible. If we were to provide an auditorium for an elementary school, MSBA would say that's ineligible. So 100% of that cost would be borne by the district. So they also have cost per square foot models. So they look at what are the trending costs. We know that historically they're not keeping up with what the real costs are in the market. So there's an adjustment for that. Site costs, there's a cap on the amount of site, so that's why, again, we emphasize, want to have the utilities on site, you want to have the town-owned properties, so that every project will cross that threshold, so you're trying to minimize the amount of money that comes out of the taxpayer's pocket. So you're trying to maximize the amount of MSBA reimbursement to the betterment of your taxpayers. There might be educational spaces that you want to include in the building that are addressed in your educational program, but not necessarily must-haves relative to the MSBA model. So again, those spaces are often deemed to be ineligible. Then you have your base reimbursement rate, and then you get to your actual net when the final audit is assessed. And that's the difference that was discussed previously.
Thank you for the explanation, appreciate it.
So I wasn't going to open this can of worms, but since Mr. Cutlass did it, that was kind of the impetus behind my questions earlier about do we need to define options we're going with now? Because there are a number of concerns I have around the funding, especially I know there was a lot of work after I was no longer on the committee, but initial discussions from what I recall were we were trying to solve a defined problem set, and it looks like we've kind of grown that out. Now, I'm all in favor of that from a study perspective because we've now scoped the problem, which is half the battle. So we know all the other work we have to do, you know, if at the Ryan, at the center, when, whatever school it is. But I do have concerns around the price tag of going with a new school. As a de facto, that's what we're doing, which is kind of why I was asking earlier about how deep we're locked into which option we're going with at this point in the process. And I would assume, based on earlier discussion, it's we're not really locked in. We're not making the decision right now that we are building a new school. Done.
Correct.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Through the chairs, I just have a comment. So the MSBA process, I know some of you have been through it, it's very prescribed. And so to your point, you wouldn't be locked in because you have to review multiple options. So you need to, study a code upgrade, you need to study an ad reno, you need to study a new building, and maybe that's on a few different sites. So to your point, you're not locked in, and you're required actually by the MSBA to study all of those options as part of the study. So.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, that was the only clarification. I was
Yep.
I thought I was missing something based on Mr. Cutlass's comments because I do agree with a number of them, but if we're not, we're confirming we are not locking into building a new school based off the decision we're making tonight, then I'm good.
Correct.
Thank
And I'll just clarify that part of the due diligence of the feasibility study is evaluating your existing facilities.
Yep.
Through our effort, we know that the average classroom size at Dewing is about 890 square feet. MSBA target size is 900 to 1,000 square feet. That's for general classrooms for grades 1 through 4 or 5, depending on the grade configuration. Your current classrooms are undersized for pre-K and K. Some don't have toilets. So that's what MSBA, that's part of that study, to understand what type of program can be supported with today's MSBA standards for eligibility, to make sure that you maximize your reimbursement, and then also delivering your educational program.
I believe that was the case at the Heathbrook as well, right? The class size?
Yeah, those classrooms range from 720 square feet to 970.
Right.
So there are some, there are about 7 that are below the standard.
Well, in that case, Mr. Cutlass, I look forward to further discussion on this when the time becomes appropriate, but
When you do the statement of interest, you're gonna have a proposed recommendation, and that's gonna be a new school. And from my experience dealing with them for 30 years, they're gonna go along with what we want, and that's completely untenable. So we can guide them. They don't guide us, we guide them. And that's my concern. If you start going down the road of a new school, I bet $1 million that's gonna cost $200 million. And it's gonna be a big burden to the average homeowner. And I think we have to do a further detailed study of what renovations we could do to the Heathbrook and the building. Some of the classes are undersized, but Heathbrook has plenty of kindergarten classes. Dillon does, and I believe Heathbrook does as well. And if the renovation, you can get waivers sometimes, like we did with the Wynn School project. We got waivers from the Architectural Review Board, and you can get waivers from the MSBA. So I think if we vote for a statement of interest that has the new school as its recommendation, that we're telling the people we're gonna charge them $1,000 a year for 20 years. And I just think that's very difficult to do.
No,
If I could clarify, Mr. Cutlass, so we have, for formality, if we take a vote tonight, the formality would include priority category 5 and 7. 5 reads, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as roof, windows, boilers, heating, and ventilation systems to increase energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs in a school facility. And statutory priority 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements. So we would be asking MSBA, and correct me if I'm wrong, to consider based on those 2 priorities.
Madam Chair, I didn't see the statement of interest, so.
Well, it's not a full statement of interest. This is the vote that we would be taking in giving the superintendent the authority to complete a statement of interest based on those 2 priorities, 5 and 7.
I agree with those 2 priorities.
And
I agree with that.
yeah, that's what
But
would
the
be
statement
given.
of interest contains a section where we include a recommendation. And since I haven't seen the statement of interest, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but I can't vote on it.
Well, it hasn't been written. That we would have to
Okay,
vote.
all right.
We would have to vote.
Well, I certainly agree with what you just said, 5 and 7, no problem with that. But before I vote on the statement of interest, just me personally, I would like to read it.
Well,
That's all I'm saying.
I guess what we're deliberating on tonight is to give the superintendent, and I guess the town manager as well, the authority to work with our consultant to write the statement of interest.
I'm
For
fine
submission.
with that, as long as we get to vote again whether we submit it to them or not.
So I guess
Is that the practice? I'm not sure how that,
that was gonna be my question.
thank you.
I'm looking for the 2015 one, just in case it's in.
I guess my question, historically, on the last time the statement of interest was submitted, both boards voted to submit the statement of interest as we're discussing it tonight.
Correct.
Statutory priority 5
7.
and statutory priority 7. So there are basically two different paths that we're asking the MSBA to look at. And they're gonna do their due diligence, they're gonna come in, they're gonna look at all of our data and make that decision. And it's all gonna come down to funding that the MSBA has, and it may be the option that they go with not building a new school. That might say, okay, it's in the best interest of the community based on costs that we recommend and we suggest that you go in this direction.
Much like the wind project.
Yes. Okay. I just want to know historically what the process has been when we've submitted the last time.
Thank you, that was my question.
Mr. Ryder, from my experience, we had a complete statement of interest in front of us, and we voted on it. And we read it, and it had a specific recommendation each time. And this is a little bit different where we're not getting that, you know. In the rules for a statement of interest, it suggests that we tell them what we want. And that's what we did with the Wynn School, with the high school, and the Center Elementary School. So I'm just saying, that's going to be part of the statement of interest. And we should be able to read it completely prior to submitting it to them.
So I appreciate Mr. Cutlass's comment because that was kind of what I was getting at with my questions. I was unaware that, I thought we were voting on this document here, and that's what goes forward. So if there's a recommendation section, or we are leaning towards or putting more information that pushes us towards an option, then I do have concerns. Because again, there's lots of work we need to do, but though we may not be locking into option 2 tonight, if that's what we're putting in as our recommendation to MSBA to consider, then I have concerns.
Madam Chair, if I could clarify?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I would appreciate it.
I put back on the screen the first slide The source information for this slide is directly from the Massachusetts School Building Authority website.
Okay.
That is their language. It is a critical first step in applying for competitive grants for new construction, additions, or renovations under MSBA's core program.
Do we have
In
to
my
provide a
experience, the statement of interest do not, and MSBA's preference is not to commit to a solution. That is the outcome of the feasibility study.
So in the statement of interest that we submit, it will not have a recommendation for option 2?
Correct.
I'm reading, just because I'm reading the old one. I'm in 2015, I'm looking at the Louise Davy Trahan. Following priorities have been included in the statement of interest. 1, replacement or renovation of a building which is structurally unsound or otherwise in condition seriously jeopardizing the health and safety of school children. 2, it talks about all that. And then the SOI vote requirement is submitted. That's what has to be done before going through the statement of interest process. And then they get submitted together. So I'm looking at that, and then there's a history of how the statement of interest came to be, which would be included. So along with the data that is provided to the committees. So having been around at the time, I know that, by the way, the first, I think it was 2, failed. So it had to get written again. It was accepted in 15. It's either 2 or 3 failed before we got the 2015 one through. So they're malleable. If you again pick statutory priority 7, you're saying you're looking at the reno, addition, or rebuild. You're not saying, you're not choosing, because MSBA, by the way, doesn't allow you to choose. They choose. And again, it's based on that big bucket of money that they decide that they have for all the districts that they accept into these projects. So I don't remember or recall, and you have worked with many, many districts. It's not written before we get, you know, in the vote to do that.
That's my understanding as well.
Is that your experience?
That's my understanding as well, but yeah.
I mean, I was assistant superintendent then. I wasn't superintendent, but I can tell you I participated in this process quite a bit with John O'Connor when we finally got that one through. As well was a participant on the school facilities study committee back then, and there was a recommendation that went forward, but that necessarily, like happened with both boards. And then that was certainly not the final project. So regardless of what we agree to, obviously both boards are going to want to agree to a statement of interest that satisfies the need, and then this community can get behind.
I couldn't hear everything clearly, but I will tell you that we had a very specific, I was the chairman of that committee and the vice chairman of the Senator's Elementary School. We had a very specific thing in mind for all of these and submitted that. And we read all the statement of interest before we voted on them. So logically, I can't understand why we're not going to read it before we vote on it.
So the
I know
bill,
why we have 2 votes. Authorize this creation of statement of interest and then have a vote to approve it. If it's the way you say it is, then that's fine with me. But it might not. I'd like to read it first. All the other ones we read first before we voted on them.
a building committee would not be.
Or just a moment. Mr. Russo?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, the agenda for tonight was the approval and the vote of the consideration for the statement of interest. Now, again, when we get to the point of locking ourselves in, that requires us to go through the feasibility study
Correct.
to design the concept of what it will look like based on a further study that is going to look at a renovation, an addition, a new school, a nothing, basically. I mean, is that?
No, you're not wrong. And the building committee would not even be formed until
Right.
after you're accepted. So there was no building committee looking at anything
Right.
prior to that. Step 1 is statement of interest. Step 2, in that eligibility phase,
Right.
the building committee there's no building committee
Right.
at this point. There's no project at
We're
this
simply,
point.
we're simply authorizing the superintendent through the town manager to be able to submit, to be able to write the statement of interest based on the priority categories that we've discussed tonight.
Correct.
Okay,
Right, and submit.
yes, thank you.
Says to submit. And then I just want to make sure, because what you're saying is that we're not, in this statement of interest, we're not recommending any options. We're just saying we want it to fit the priority categories 5 and 7.
Correct.
Right.
This piece was to show the need.
Yeah.
And to try, and if we're gonna get in line to
Yep.
move forward on some resolution of that need.
I have a question.
Yeah, Mr. McCarthy.
You recommended 2 for the new school. What's Plan B? What was the next best option? Of the ones you gave us, what was the next best
I'd have to
option?
go back and look at the one that had 2 statement of interest, right? It wasn't that linear in terms of, they were looking at the different grade configurations, looking at meeting your educational needs. That's why option 2 rose to the top, because it checked all those boxes. I'd have to go back and look at our data. I don't recall what option 2 would have been.
So Plan B. I mean, we talked about all of them.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so one other thing, if you could clarify too, Doug. So for the statement of interest, there also needs to be an identified school. So we did discuss the Dewing as being the building that kind of rose to the top in terms of worst condition. So that
Correct.
that was
Correct.
the school that we should.
And that was based on the, excuse me for interrupting, the accessibility issues at Dewing?
Okay, so in your opinion, that would be the building that we would just identify as being the worst and saying that would qualify the most for MSBA to first kind of maybe give us the qualification to come out and then kind of open things up where they would look at all of our options.
Correct. From a prioritization standpoint, mechanical systems at Dewing and Heathbrook are relative, same age, same condition, same need of replacement, where Dewing has accessibility issues that Heathbrook does not.
Okay.
So again, from our standpoint, our assessment of the 2 facilities, even though it is 20 years younger, it is in greater need.
And even though we indicate the doing on the statement of interest, if we choose to go that route, MSBA could still accept us, look at this. Once they start looking at all of our buildings, they could turn around and say, actually, we don't think the doing is the problem. We think you should renovate the doing, close the Ryan, and renovate the Heathbrook. I mean, like, you know what I mean? They could have their own.
They very well come
perspective
back
on
with the
whatever.
different target project.
Right, okay.
And part of the grade configurations and enrollment part of the study,
Yep.
they could offer that as an option to be considered or
Okay.
evaluated as the feasibility study.
Okay, I mean, that was a silly thing for me to say, but I'm just
Go ahead.
kind of, I'm saying they could come up with their
All
own
kinds of rumors out there.
Correct.
plan. Okay, I know, sorry.
I have a question.
Yes.
If we put the statement of interest in, the feasibility study, is that a vote at town meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
So right now, we're committing to $0 if we go forward until we hit the potential for the feasibility study, which is not presented to us individually, it's presented to the town. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
So we're not authorizing the funding of anything on our own. That's what I want to clarify as well.
I just had one comment about the school. I just wanted to give 2 examples, not my projects, but colleagues at Left Field worked in Marblehead and just gave an example of they submitted on their Gary Elementary School, and then they also looked at with the MSBA Gary, Bell, and Eveleth. Those are 3 different schools, and they ended up with one larger school on a different site. And then in Wilmington, they submitted on one elementary school in Wilmington, but then they looked at 3, and again, they ended up combining schools as well on another site. So just wanted to give folks that, it sounds like that happens often with the MSBA. So if you submit on a doing, then, you know, it would be still a conversation with the MSBA.
Okay.
Sorry, one question.
Yep.
Is the final option that's set forth to the town in May 2030, is that MSBA or is that a discussion and agreement between MSBA and this facility committee on what that final option and price tag is?
That would be a building committee, but.
Building, yeah. So it's a joint effort. It's not MSBA just comes and says, this is what we're telling you to go ask your town for funding.
Correct. There would be multiple votes at the school building committee.
Okay.
And then it would be taken from there, and there are multiple submissions in the MSBA process. And each of those process, you're updating the MSBA, you're providing them with a report. I say you, really, your design team, your owner's project manager, and the school building committee are working together. And it's a very transparent process, very prescribed by the MSBA, and each of those goes for a vote with first school building committee and then at the MSBA.
And part of that transparency is ensuring that there are community meetings
Yes.
at each stage to report on the information that's being evaluated and decisions that are being brought forward for recommendations. So again, as Lena said, it's an open, transparent process
Yep.
to inform your community along the entire path, to minimize any surprises. We always get to the end and somebody's like, I didn't know we had a school building project going on. We've been working on it for 3 years, but it's the first they've heard of it. But there is an effort to make sure that the community is informed.
And Doug, just to follow up on Kayla's comment is, we're looking at submitting, then it'll get back to, we have to go in front of town meeting for that $1 to $2 million. And again, as you just stated, there are going to be multiple meetings for the public, residents of Tewksbury, to understand what directions we're going to start to move forward. And we're going to start to hone in with those groups to really identify our path, the clear path.
Correct.
And at that point, that's when a real decision has to be made. Is it going to be 147? Is it going to be 200 million? Is it going to be 65 at the Dewin? Is it going to be 83 at the Heathbrook? We're going to start to define those numbers
Correct.
much more clearly as we get into the process.
Right.
Again, today, we're just voting to start the process, to be able to get to that next step, to be able to go to the feasibility study, and we may go to town meeting. And residents have all been paying attention to this and understanding all of these options. And they may get to that and say, we're not at a place right now that we can support $2 million, knowing it's going to be 50, 80, or 147 million in the near future. It may get to that, and that's the truth. And it's the residents that are going to make that decision. And once we have this come in front of them for the feasibility, and then each step of the way to understand what that big cost is going to be in that May 2030 vote.
Correct.
So, Mr. Chair, are you looking for some motion this evening, or how do you want to handle this in a joint manner?
Well, our boards would have to take separate votes and separate motions.
So what we're looking for is, once discussion was finalized, we went through it, we'll open it to motions, and then we'll take a vote on both boards, see what we want to move forward. But we just want to make sure everybody's got their questions in and concerns. I agree, I kind of been quiet a lot of this, because I know it's going to come back to us. I mean, that's the simple answer. It's, even when they get to the building commission, the building department will come up, they'll come up with recommendations, then they're gonna come back to both boards, and they're gonna make recommendations. There're gonna be plenty of public meetings, and then it'll go to town meeting, and the residents are gonna have the final say.
Always.
But like I said, before then, there's gonna be plenty of public meetings of, we can have the debate. Should we be doing this? Should we be doing renovations? Should there be plenty of time for residents to get up there and argue, why are we doing this? Why can't we do that? And have those discussions. This is just to get us going.
Correct.
I agree with Mr. Kratman. You can sit there and say, as Mr. Mackey stated, we do not have to choose 1 through 6. But if we don't do anything, we're just kicking the can down the road. So what we have to do is authorize the statement of interest, so at least we can move forward. And as you had stated before, then it will all come together on which division or which model we're going to choose. And we're not even sure we're going to get accepted for this.
Correct.
You know, so that's the tough part. So if we don't submit it, if we decide to do it, we're going to eat all the money, you know, versus the state paying 40% or 60%. So I don't have a problem with motioning to move forward with the superintendent of schools submitting the application.
Is that a formal motion, Mr. Holland?
Oh, I think somebody has, do we have to read it?
Well, what I was gonna do is, we have the chair of the committee, and I was gonna put it over to you. Do you have any
Yeah,
final thoughts on this? And
No, I mean, I think we've covered it in great detail. So, I mean, I'm willing to make the motion from the select board side to authorize the superintendent of schools to submit to MSBA the statement of interest for the Lowella Doing School with prioritizing categories 5 and 7 from an MSBA standpoint.
all right, so the select board, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Do we need to, I think we need the actual motion specific here.
Well, that's the resolution.
Well, but I think we should be,
Well, that's what I did.
okay, and that's fine. I just want to make sure that we're, to the town manager, are we making sure that we're voting on the right motion?
I don't think you have to read that word for word, do you?
Okay.
Or do you, is the motion sufficient?
Yeah.
I think that motion is sufficient.
Yeah.
Maybe
Okay,
just
again, I just want to make sure we're,
No, I-
we don't
just-
have to come back again and say we didn't
Yeah.
check the boxes.
We do
on our
just have to certify this. Yeah.
Correct, yes, just for everyone to know, so after this, I'm holding the school committee vote, but I know the select board has it as well, so these letters will come as attest letters on letterhead and need to be stamped by the town clerk, signed by the town manager and the chair of the school committee as well. So I would specifically reference the letter, would be my suggestion.
That's what, I just want to make sure that we're actually formalizing the
Sure.
vote correctly, so there's
Yep.
no question, oh, you didn't formalize, it wasn't done properly, there was a procedure. Let's just,
Yep.
making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do.
So I got a motion from Mr. Russo, I got a second. Okay, so, and, well, because we're on Zoom, we have somebody, what I'll do is do a roll call vote for all our members. Mr. Russo?
I vote aye.
Yeah, Mr. Mackey?
Aye.
Mr. Holland?
Aye.
Ryder?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. I'm gonna pass it to you for your vote.
Okay. Any final comments, Mr. Cullis?
No, Mrs. Chairperson, I will vote aye to keep the process going, because I believe we have to fix those two schools. I'm very much against, and I know how important that recommendation will be, and it can contain a life of its own. Very much against that new school, because I know it's going to be more than 200 million. But I will vote yes to keep the process going.
Okay, so on our end, we'll need a motion from the...
Madam Chair, I'd like to
committee.
make a motion to move forward with the approval of the statement of interest consideration as presented in the letterhead provided.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, for a roll call vote, Mr. Moncada, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Katie, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye, Caleb.
Okay, and Mr. Cutlass, how do you vote?
Yes, aye, I will vote aye.
Okay, and I vote aye as well, so that's a unanimous vote from both boards. And just for logistical purposes, I will just cover a couple of things that are in this, just to be sure that this was an open meeting. I did read the priority category 5 and 7, so that was covered. This is going to include the Lowella Doing Elementary School due to the deficiency, and that was highlighted in the reports that were covered in our meetings, and also that by specifically acknowledging submitting the statement of interest, the form, the Massachusetts Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or approval of the application, the awarding grant of any funding commitment from the Massachusetts Building Authority, nor commits the town of Tewksbury to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts Building Authority. So I wanted to clarify that as well. So those are the points I wanted to make sure that we're putting out there for the community. So that concludes anything I think that we had. Is there anything else, any public comment? Do we have anybody who'd like to speak? No? Okay, seeing nobody?
Before we make a motion to adjourn, I would like to make one comment. Tonight is Mr. Holland's last meeting with us as a select board member, and I want to thank him for all his service. He served on many boards with us, with the Conservation and Select Board, and he will be greatly missed, and you're getting off easy, my friend.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. No speech.
Thank you, Mr. Holland, for your service and your time. And thank you to the Select Board for the collaborative effort with forming the subcommittee, working with the school committee and the community with some of this work. I think it's been a little tricky, and I want to say thank you very much. I appreciate very much the work. And Mr. Curran, coming into this midway, I think has been tricky for you as well. So thank you very much. I think you've been an asset to us, so thank you. And, Mr. Cutlass, you've worked hard on this as well, so thank you. And the superintendent, the work that you've been doing, and, JCJ and Left Field, you guys have been awesome to work with, so thank you. I appreciate the time that you're going to be putting into this statement of interest, because I know calendars are getting cleared, so thank you. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the school committee portion of this meeting.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Marcotta, how do you vote?
Aye.
Katie, how do you vote?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
And Mr. Cutlass, how do you vote? Aye. And I vote aye as well for a 7:36 adjournment. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please step by saying aye.
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 Roll call vote as well, real quickly. Mr. Russo. Mr. Mackey.
Aye.
Mr. Griner.
Aye.
Mr. Holland.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. We're adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.